Hello and welcome to the Practical Animal Channel with me, John Beaumont. This channel is for you if you want to work with animals. The question that immediately arises is, do you want to work with wild or domestic animals? If you want to work with domestics, do you want to work with companion animals or agricultural animals? And if with wild animals, do you want to work with animals in captivity or in nature? Most weeks we try and arrange an interview with an animal industry professional who we ask questions such as, can you describe your career and can you explain the skills necessary to do your job? Can you explain the personal qualities necessary to do your job? How would you describe the current profession that you're in, and what's the trajectory for the future? So if those questions are of interest to you, if you want to work with animals, maybe you're a student at a land-based college studying animal management or one of the allied subjects there, and you're wondering what sectors are open to you, this channel and today's show is for you. Today we have a gentleman who used to work for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service as a field biologist. His name is Thane Humphreys, and we're going to be asking those questions. How did you become a field biologist? What were the skills necessary? What were the qualities necessary? He's got some fantastic stories because we've been communicating about this for about 2 weeks. So without further ado, Thane Humphreys, welcome to the Practical Animal Channel.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Thane, please can you tell the viewer, you were a field biologist. How did you come to be one?
So I'm in Alaska, and Alaska is a little bit different than the rest of the world. We have about 5 times the land mass of the UK with 65 million less people. At a very young age, I acquired a very high level of wilderness skills and competencies in hunting and fishing and camping, camping without a tent or anything like that. So it was the type of skills that Fish and Wildlife needed, and my mother happened to know one of the top guys at Fish and Wildlife, and they were talking about needing somebody to do a Peregrine Falcon study up in the Arctic. And he knew me and my skills, and so he's asked my mom, as you guys would say over there, me mom, if I would be interested in working for them. And when mom asked me, I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. You're a kid, you don't know any better. So my first thing out the door was floating rivers in the Arctic, the Colville River, the Tanana River, the Yukon River, and spending seasons up there just watching the Peregrine Falcons and the Gyrfalcons and other raptors. We categorized and counted the raptors. At that time, the Peregrine Falcon was on the endangered species list. This is the tundrius variant, Falco peregrinus tundrius. And so they were trying to assess how bad it was. Another part of our job was try to catch people poaching eggs or fledglings. And at that time, in the Saudi and other Arabian countries, there was a big thing for falconry, right? And peregrines were hard to get, and so we'd be up at in the places in Fairbanks. Even though I was too young to be in a bar and didn't drink, I was supposed to hang out in the bars and look for anybody that looked interesting. And they always had an open checkbook if you could bring them an egg or a fledgling, and you name your price, kind of a thing. So part of my thing was funded by the law enforcement division of Fish and Wildlife, and part of it was I was supposed to try to catch people trying to buy eggs or fledglings. No, we were only serving peregrines and gyrs. And we did have a permit to take duck samples, stomach samples. We were supposed to shoot ducks and take their stomachs and put them in formaldehyde, send them back to the lab for dissection. If you're going to be out in the field, you just got to roll with things. Things are going to happen. You be as preventive as you can, but it's good to be resilient and kind of self-sufficient. So the Gyrfalcons, as you probably know, they're like dog fighters. They like to come in behind their prey and go like that. And ptarmigan are pretty fast flyers. I don't know if you don't have anything like that there, do you, ptarmigan? You have grouse, right?
I've got ptarmigan up in Scotland.
Okay. Yeah.
And you mentioned that the peregrine falcons over there have adapted to taking ground prey.
And so the Norway ship rat found its way onto the island, and they were prolific, very prolific. In fact, part of my job out there was to exterminate fox from the Russian fur trade and exterminate rats the best I could, and because the Aleutian Canada goose was endangered at that time, and one of the biggest reasons it was endangered was the predators on their eggs and stuff. They had no natural predator out there, and all of a sudden these introduced predators. So, well, all of a sudden by evolutionary standards, but not all of a sudden by our standard. So the Pelei had adapted very quickly since World War II, relatively quickly, to taking advantage of this massive influx of rats. And so it would sit up on a perch and just drop onto the rat. It wouldn't come in from a big stoop and it would sit up somewhere high where it knew rats would be scurrying around and then drop on it. That was be able to move fast across very, very rough terrain, tussocks and tundra. Though you definitely want a degree if you're going to get serious about this type of stuff. You want a degree in biology, and I recommend that kids that are interested in this, and I say kids because I'm 61 years old, so I recommend that they talk to their local fish and game about an apprenticeship program. See if there's any type of apprenticeship programs that they can get involved in. There used to be a youth conservation corps. I don't know if it's still out there. That's the best way to get introduced to this stuff right up front and start making relationships. The people that know you and know your capabilities. Be open to learning new skills, new capabilities. I don't know what it's like over there in the UK. I don't even know if you have bears over there, but over here, they're probably looking for young recruits with a biology degree. I don't know if they specialize in bears, because I know some of the bear takers also take wolves and other stuff, so, but I think there might be even a path for bear biologists, period. Just look at that and talk to Fish and Game. The state Fish and Game over here is really friendly. You just talk to them, they'll take time. The federal Fish and Wildlife, I do the same thing. Just find out who's the local bear biologist for the feds, and just ask them, hey, I'm very interested in this. I'm majoring in biology. Is there a way to do a summer internship? Who do I talk to about that? Yes. And that guy was one of them. He called himself the brother of the bear or something. The bear's my brother. He will never hurt me. Or I had another person say, I'm a vegetarian. Bears don't sense any threat from me because I'm a vegetarian. And I told him, you do know what bears eat, right? They eat vegetarians. Moose are vegetarians. Deer are vegetarians. So in any case, it can be we have quite a few grizzly killings up here, or maulings up here, over time, and it can be dangerous. So that's why I say go in eyes wide open. Also, growing up in Alaska, hunting was natural. We kill animals, we eat them. We kill animals, we use their fur. We don't kill them and waste them. The only time you waste something is if you had to kill something in self-defense and you can't use it, right? But bears, wolverines, wolves, even moose are even more dangerous than bears.
Really?
Yeah, more people are attacked by moose than bears.
So, for a professional naturalist in Alaska, having to contend with moose and bears as potential risk factors in their work, how do professional naturalists cope with that risk of bear mauling, bear attack, and moose attack?
So I can only say how I did it, and that was I was always prepared. But this was before the invention of pepper spray, for example. The only spray that worked was lead, and that usually came out of the barrel of a gun. So you had to, if you panic, you're going to miss. You know, you have to not panic, but you start by getting familiar with the animals and their habits and their body language and their habitat and their smells and their sounds. And I think I was very fortunate. It's not fair to assume everybody should be able to do this. I was very fortunate that I lived amongst these creatures for most of my life on the homestead, you know, so they were there. And so you got to learn what's the body language of a bear, what's the body language of a moose, what's aggressive, what's not, what's curious, what's normal, what's abnormal, and then the sounds they make a big difference too, and the smells. I could tell all kinds of stories about going through heavy alder brush. It's over your head, and it's just dense thicket. And I learned from the bears actually how to walk through it because they have the fur on top of their paws, right? And they drag their foot over the alder and then set it down like that. So I learned to do that with my feet too. It's a little bit awkward, but after a while, hunting. And that which man considers a trophy, nature considers done because it's already contributed to the gene pool. And there's areas up here along the coastlines, especially where the cub survival rate is very, very low. The mortality rate for cubs is very, very low because of male bear predation. They go and kill the cubs. And even if it's too old to breed, it kills the cubs out of habit. And sometimes they even eat them. And then they let the hunters in, and the hunters take down these big trophy males that are too old, and the cub population goes back up again. So a well-managed hunting program is essential to a balanced. People say, "Well, let nature do it." Well, nature's kind of rough on the animals. The natural way is extremely cruel, very cruel. The bears get mauled and beat up and die of starvation, or it's not a good way to go. And I tell people, and if you watch wolves take down a moose, for example, they don't care if the moose is alive or dead. They'll start eating on it. A bear, same thing. It'll throw the moose around. 1,500-pound moose, I've watched a bear just kind of flip it, and then they'll just start gutting it and eating it while it's still alive. There's no humane in nature, nothing humane. And when I teach people to hunt, like I taught my daughter to hunt, and I taught my foster boy to hunt, and quite a few kids, their parents asked me to teach their kids to hunt. I always tell them, I said, humans are the only species that have the ability to be humane, the only species. And therefore we have an obligation when we hunt to be humane for many reasons. One, it's the right thing to do. The other is the meat tastes really bad if you don't have a clean kill. So your goal as a hunter is to become an excellent shot in all conditions and always have a clean one-shot kill. So sometimes an animal will move, go a ways after a bullet enters a vital area, but the body's in shock at that point. So it's not really a painful thing, but you never want to wound an animal and have it go crawl off in the bushes somewhere to die a slow, agonizing death over hours. So you really have to take it serious if you're going to be a hunter. You have to really understand that you are the only one that can be humane, and you must do that. So we pass up shots where we're not sure it'll be a clean kill. Anyway, so learning the habits of the animals and the smells of the animals and the body language of the animals makes it really easy to get through the woods with them, and get along with them. You see when they're agitated, you see when they're angry, you see when they're scared. You can sense it. So that's the secret.
I spent some time in Malaysia, during which I was charged by an elephant, and the very
Ooh,
next day I had to, the very next 2 months, I had to go straight back to my study site knowing there were elephants around. I want to talk to you or ask you about personal qualities necessary to be a field naturalist in those conditions when you know that you're walking through thick alder brush higher than a man, and you know that there are grizzlies there or moose there, and there's a high risk of potential attack. How do you cope with the risk of being attacked?
well, so part of that depends on the goal. Well, why are you walking through that thicket, right? So if you're walking through the thicket to get from point A to point B, the very first thing you want to do is make a lot of noise. But if you're walking through the thicket to get to something on the other side that you don't want to know it's coming, you don't want it to know you're coming, then you're in stealth mode. You want to have your senses wide open. You don't be inside your head. You're out there. You're listening to every sound. You're looking for every movement. You're hearing every. You're smelling every smell. Bears smell like a wet dog times 10. They're they're not a pretty animal. They're very stinky. They'll roll on a carcass. They're just nasty. Um, and in that thickness, sound and smell are your biggest things. And I actually adapted a way of getting through uh, where it's a very slow and tedious method. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of muscle leg strength too, because basically you're moving one step. You take one step and you put your foot down. Before you put your weight on it, you're feeling what's under it, and then you adjust that step, and then you take all your weight on that leg as you slowly pull the other leg up and over and do the same. It can take an hour to walk through a thicket, just because when you're trying to be in stealth mode, because you don't want anything to know you're there. Well, bears are pretty quiet too going through the thicket, but they still will make more noise than I will because they don't have anything to fear, right? So my biggest advice to people is go with somebody who knows already for the first time, but also go with your senses wide open. If you're hard, if you're deaf or your sense of smell is gone, you probably don't want to be doing that. It's just not a healthy thing. But most of the time, you avoid the thickets when you know there's bears there.
Am I right in thinking that it is highly recommended or essential for a professional field naturalist to have a knowledge of how to fire a gun? And if that person has come from an urban environment where possibly they don't have many opportunities to learn to shoot, how does a professional naturalist working in bear country or moose country, how can a professional naturalist gain shooting skills?
I do recommend that you have that. Now, there is a new movement within the naturalist and biologist world to use pepper spray or to try to find non-lethal methods of repellent. And believe it or not, I actually agree with that, but only to the point where it doesn't endanger a human life. Because I'll never put an animal's life over a human life. It's just not the right thing to do. So um, I recommend that if there's I wish I knew more about the UK, but is there anything like a shooting club over there where kids can do like use small rifles just to learn how to aim? If you've never shot before, going to a range with somebody who's experienced in teaching is probably the very best way to get proficient with a firearm. But I highly recommend hunting. I mean, I highly recommend. I got my first moose in 6th grade, and I've gotten a moose every year since then, just about every year, unless I was traveling or something, right? And that's what we eat. It fills the freezer. There's plenty left over to, it's 1,500-pound animal. There's plenty to share with neighbors and elderly and, the infirm. Um, just being out there hunting teaches you lots and lots and lots of stuff, especially about the animal behavior. And we see far more animals than we take. We only take one animal per year for the whole family. That's it. But a real hunter, a good hunter, loves being out there and just observing the animals and seeing them, even when he's not taking one. So the best way to do it is immersion. But I recommend immersion with somebody who knows what they're doing. That's all. Just immersion. But if you have to immerse by yourself, like have a plane drop you off in the Arctic somewhere or whatever, just make sure you know the very basics about how to shoot, because you don't want to be fumbling with your equipment while animals running at you at 35 miles an hour. You want to be quick. You want it to be muscle memory, so you don't even have to think. It's just instinctive. And so the gun I carry most out in the bush is a 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. And I think it's the biggest production handgun on the market. It's the bullet is, I don't know if you know anything about velocities and stuff, but a 44 mag is a big difference between what you could do when you're the hunter, excuse me, and what eliminates the margin for error when you're the hunted. And when you're the hunted, you want to hit it with the biggest thing you can and still control. And that's why I recommend the bigger calibers. So if you're going into the woods, take nothing less than a 44 Magnum. Up in Alaska, take nothing less than a 44 Magnum. Buy a couple dozen boxes of ammo, or a dozen boxes of ammo, and spend some time just shooting. Put a tin can out and plank, shoot different distances, just get used to it. And then try to spend enough time where you can pull it and shoot without second thought. And then you're ready. And then bring your
person listening to you describing how to learn shooting is very interesting. If a person aspires to becoming a professional naturalist, a professional biologist in bear country, in moose country, in Alaska, Canada, it is against that they're aware of the risks involved and the need to understand guns and shooting, maybe for defensive purposes, but it's against their core values. How can you persuade somebody that really they need to learn this stuff, shooting?
Yeah, so in Alaska, most of the biologists I know are hunters too. Hunting's natural. We're in the food chain. We just hope we're at the top of it. So it's just a natural way of life. It's the cleanest, healthiest, and the mindset of the kids that I know that hunt they're some of the most balanced kids you ever met, that you will never get a closer look at the natural world than you will if you're a hunter. And that's, you're hunting for food or predator control if you have to, right? But you're usually hunting for food. Veterinarians, the naturalists, the biologists, all of them I know in Alaska hunt, and they hunt to feed their families. And I don't know how it's such an irreplaceable experience. If any of the kids thinking about doing this can find a way to go on a hunt and do it with somebody that experienced, that can tell them it's okay to feel these emotions. It's natural. You should feel these emotions. And then skin the animal. When you're butchering a carcass, you learn a lot about the animal. And you got a moose, you got a 1,500-pound animal down on the ground. You're hundreds of miles away from the nearest road. There's no tractor to come in and lift it or anything. You're butchering it right there on the ground. It's a lot of work. It's hard work. So the killing takes 2 seconds. Pull a trigger. But after that, the work begins.
Brilliant explanation. I want to talk. I went to Israel about 20 years ago to survey migratory birds of prey there. And to do that, we needed to be pretty tolerant of the heat. And we needed to be able to use binoculars and spotting scopes. And we needed to be able to identify migratory birds of prey at height and mixed flocks, several thousand strong. What were the skills that you needed for the peregrine and Gyrfalcon survey?
Very similar to what you talked about. We had good binoculars. Zeiss was the brand we used up there. I think we had a lights also once, but good optics are essential. You can't skimp on the optics. You probably developed the ability to distinguish differences when they're just a little speck with the naked eye, didn't you? So the mosquitoes are a big challenge, and then the fluctuation between, say, 70 degrees Fahrenheit and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. A 4th of July weekend, we had a big blizzard come in, and had a lot of snow. So to be able to take the fluctuation in temperatures.
So you did all these incredibly interesting things like surveying Gyrfalcons, surveying peregrines, working with the Canada geese on the Aleutians, tagging and helping with the sedation of Kodiak bears. You needed skills like how to make a camp, how to survive if, due to unforeseen circumstances, you were abandoned in the field. You learned to hunt from an early age, and you knew how to butcher your animal as a food animal. If somebody wanted to be employed nowadays as a professional naturalist or professional biologist, could they still do it the way that you did it?
That's a good question. I guess it would depend on where they came from, right? If they came from a land or a country that had those opportunities, then they could. I would, if they live in an area where it can be done, I'd recommend they just, as young as possible, spend some time out by themselves in the woods, or whatever passes for wildlands there. Just start cataloging everything you see. Just take a little field notebook. They have waterproof field notebooks. Just start writing down what you see. And if you don't know what it is, bring your bird book or bring your mammal book or whatever and try to identify it. Take pictures of it. Just start doing an inventory of creatures, which does two things. One, it broadens your knowledge of what's out there, but two, it also trains your mind to look and observe and try to find it. And then while you're out there, try, if you're allowed to, try hunting or try snaring or trapping something to eat, for the night. Try building a fire without matches or without a lighter.
Thane, how would you describe the profession today of being a professional naturalist or a professional field biologist?
I think it's much more reliant on education now than when I was a kid. But it's really important to get to schooling. They selected me because of my natural abilities, but people don't have that anymore, I don't think, or it's rare, or they'd probably be older having those abilities. So I really recommend you get that, spend as much time outdoors observing as you can as a hobby, say, and then get your education. The better educated you are, the better chance you have. And then again, reach out and ask for a summer internship or volunteer for free. I remember when Larry Boot was alive.
How do you see the profession of being a field naturalist or a field biologist in upland areas, mountainous areas, or wilderness areas? How do you see that profession developing, say, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
I think it's going to become more important. The more populated the planet becomes, the more important it is going to be to be aware of what's going on around you, in the natural world. The biggest problem I see is politics. Different administrations have different views on how valuable something is. And so you see programs funded and defunded and funded and defunded. And that's today's naturalists and biologists need to have good computer skills. They need to be comfortable and good with working with data, not only manipulating and working with data once it's in the computer, but in acquiring the data out in the field. So the more you can learn, the better. I don't think there's an opening the way I got in anymore. I just don't think it's there anymore.
Thane Humphreys, thank you very much for being on the Practical Animal Channel.
My pleasure. Thank you. Good luck with your program. You got a really good thing going here.